Okay, we have a quorum. We have a full house of a quorum for the Finance Committee on March 10th at 6:30 p.m. I will call the meeting to order. Let's do just a roll call for Catherine of presence. Jim Purdy,
Carrie Gelsma.
Alex Began.
David Molitano.
Susan Malin.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, the first order of agenda is, do we have any folks who are in a queue or for comment, public comment, or questions at this point? Okay. I had heard that some folks may be.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one, Jim. I apologize.
Okay. Hi, Carrie.
Catherine Harrison is seeking to add public input.
Oh, Catherine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good evening, FinCom. If I may, I just wanted to make a quick comment. It's probably not a subject you'd be surprised that I comment on. I know there's been a lot of discussion around the master plan, and I just felt compelled tonight to throw my 2 cents in, if that's okay. I have been and continue to be fully in support of the master plan. I understand the questions and the concerns that everybody has, and I've listened to your meetings. But a couple of things, one of the questions that has come up is, well, why now? Some of that's obvious, because we haven't had one since 1980. There's probably never a good time, but there's a particular reason, I think, and I've been involved in a couple of these things, and someone else has mentioned it, but I just wanted to bring up, we have 3 plans in place that have been done very recently that are very pertinent to a master plan. We have an Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan. We have an Open Space and Recreation Committee plan, and we actually 4, an age, what is it called? An age and dementia friendly plan, as well as a housing production plan, housing needs assessment. All of those things, all of the data in all of those plans will be very important to putting together a master plan. They may not decrease the cost, but they certainly will inform a master plan. And the older they get, the less useful they are. And they're all about the same age, so a couple of years old. So that's one reason. The only second thing I wanted, well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the community to get involved, and the timing is good right now because there's so much community involvement. It's great. It would be great to capture that, I think. But it occurs to me that one of the important things is to memorialize the plan. As we know, a plan, we know things change. And if we have, I don't know if there's still 20-year plans, that does seem like a long time, but if we have a plan that's written down and people have given input to, leadership may change. It may completely turn over, as we've seen. Staff may change. FinCom may change, but we'll have a plan, and we'll be able to make decisions with a plan that is, memorialized and has had a lot of input. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. Thank you for giving me a minute. I think it's never easy to spend whatever $100,000, but I just think it's really important for us this year. So thanks, and have a good rest of the meeting.
The master plan will be part of incorporated into our discussions as we go through the budget over tonight and next week, and probably the Wednesday after that, as we close in on where we stand and how we get to a budget. Hopefully, that will be a neutral budget with no override. So that's our goal. But thanks for the input. Appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda. If anyone, by the way, is there anyone else in the public chat? No. What else? Okay, very good.
No one.
The third piece is the date for the budget forum. That, I'm assuming that what you mean by that, Jackie, is the public hearing on the warrant articles?
So we have 2 dates for you tonight, Jim. We have the date of the warrant hearing, which is just for everyone's calendar, is going to be Monday, the 26th of April and that's the official warrant hearing date. Um,
Okay,
But we also wanted to bring up, tomorrow, Nikki is finalizing some postcards that'll be mailed to all households with the upcoming dates for the elections and town meeting. In the past few years, the FinCom has trended where you've done a budget forum a couple weeks ahead of the warrant
right.
to field community questions, and make initial comments on the budget after, the budget's closed while the warrant's in print, being printed. So I wanted to find out if that was something the FinCom had appetite for this year, because we'd love to include it on the postcard with all of the other election-related news for households.
Mhm.
So offering Wednesday, the 14th of April as a potential date for that at your usual day and time, or the 21st of April as a backup date.
Mhm.
Wanted to get your input because we'd love to include the date on a postcard that'll be going out soon with all of the election news, if it's something you're interested in.
FinCom members, comments, observations, thoughts about well, the warrant hearing is pretty standard. We have that every year. I think it's required. And then having an informational meeting, which I think historically has been helpful to the community. That's my own observation. Other thoughts, observations about that?
I think the budget forum has been helpful for public engagement and, sorry, it's the dogs again. And I think either date will work for me.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think they're helpful, if not widely attended in live format. Hopefully people watch their recordings when they're able to. And particularly when there are, overrides or, other significant kind of expenditures or, matters that the public is extra interested in, that residents want to hear about in a given year. So we may or may not have those items, but I'd be in support of one in either day, 14th or 21st as a backup works for me. Thank you.
I'll keep it short. I would agree.
Me too.
Okay, so 21st, the warrant hearings on the 26th. How about, would we have our house in order by the 14th? So we have a 2-week period between that and the warrant hearing.
So I know Selectman Cheeseman is here. The expectation is that we're going to be closing the warrant the week of March 23rd, so that we can get the warrant book to the printer. So I think that would give you roughly 2 to 3 weeks from finishing the budget and closing the warrant to develop your PowerPoint for the budget forum. And then that gives us 2 weeks between the budget forum and the warrant hearing in case there's anything we want to follow up on. So I think my thought was the 14th, just to kind of spread things out a little, but it's the FinCom's discretion, whatever you feel like is better for you all.
Well, I was suggesting the 14th as well, to give us a 12-day time period. Does it make any difference? Alex and Carrie, both of those dates work for you folks?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Susan? Dave?
I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. David?
Yeah, I
Okay,
think the 21st is tough, but other than that, it's fine.
let's go with the 14th. 14th and the 26th it is. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into recommendations to town meeting on some routine financial matters. You want to put those up so we can, thank you, Jamie. Okay, how do you want to proceed here? There's no money attached to the cemetery and other trust funds. That's typically a open-ended amount of money. Gary, you're familiar with this as well, certainly. So Article 3, to see if the town will accept the cemetery and other trust funds received in fiscal year 20 as printed in part 1 of the town report and on file with the town clerk. pretty routine over the years article. Any comments, questions, or considerations around accepting trust funds? Okay.
I make
Article,
one clerical item.
yep,
So we are looking for the FinCom to vote to make a recommendation of favorable or
oh,
unfavorable
okay,
action to town meeting on each of these items. If
okay,
you're ready tonight on these, I recognize this is the first meeting you've seen them. But I just, at some point, we will look for those recommendations to town meeting.
FinCom, are you comfortable on Article 3 to make a favorable or unfavorable recommendation and to take a hand vote on it?
Yes.
Works for
Yes.
me.
Susan,
Yes.
David? David?
I gave the thumbs up just to
Okay.
not talk over people.
Okay, thank you, David. All right, I'll make a motion if that's okay. I move that the Finance Committee accept Article 3 to accept the cemetery and other trust funds received in fiscal year 20 as printed in Part 1 of the town report and on file with the town clerk.
Jim,
Second,
are you recommending favorable action on that item to town meeting?
right.
Nitpick your motion just a smidge. So looking for favorable action on this article as a
Okay.
recommendation to
Okay,
town meeting.
So Catherine T.
Yes.
Make a motion to accept and with favorable action to accept the cemetery and other trust funds, et cetera, et cetera.
Jim, we're not accepting. I just want to make sure I have the wording right. You just
Right.
want to vote to recommend favorable action to town meeting.
To see if the town will vote to accept.
No, you're not accepting. You just want to recommend favorable action.
Oh, that's all we're doing. So
Yes,
we're recommending, I'm sorry. Very
That's
good.
okay.
We're recommending, make a motion to recommend favorable action to the town meeting members on Article.
perfect.
Got it.
I second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion? Aye, Jim?
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, David.
Hi, Susan.
Hi, Alex.
Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Okay, Article 4, Cemetery Maintenance Fund Transfer. To transfer the sum of $6,000 for the sale of cemetery lots. Receipts reserved for the appropriation account to be used with the amounts appropriated for the highway department expenditures. Wait a minute, what is this? Let me read this again. So what's this saying here, just so we understand the article? To
So,
transfer
Jim,
the
this-
sum of $6,000 from the sales receipts reserved for appropriation account to be used with accounts appropriated for the highway department expenditures under Article 1. So explain that a little bit, if you guys can. Just so we.
Sure. So Jim, this annual article takes some of the receipts from the sale of cemetery lots and transfers them to the general fund. A few
Okay.
years ago, we were transferring about 7,500. Now it's down to 6,000 based on actual sales.
Yeah.
And this is to help compensate the general fund budget for the time the DPW spends mowing and doing landscaping at the cemeteries here in town.
So the dollars go into the general fund. It says here appropriated for, not for highway department expenditures under Article 1. Okay, I got it. It's not going into the highway DPW budget, but general fund and for the expenditures of. Very good. Okay.
Correct.
And can I just clarify, is this the same as what we've done in the past?
Correct.
Essentially? Okay, thank you.
And is it Article 1 or Article 2?
Article 4.
No,
It's
I mean,
Article 4,
Oh.
but it's referencing Article 1, which will be the operating budget.
okay, so, all right,
That's the overall, the big budget.
okay, yeah, all right.
Those are great questions, Susan, though. Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying it.
Who would like to make the motion to favorably accept Article 4?
I'm happy to, Jim, if you're asking, but can I just ask a quick question first? So on the amount of 6,000, just looking to the commentary that speaks to 15 to 20K generally, has that been a gradual decline? I can't recall what last year we did. Is that just wondering why it's a fraction of, a third roughly of what on the low end of what we'd normally transfer?
So the last year we also did 6,000, and prior to that it was 7,500. And I'm actually glad you brought that up, Alex, because I need to check the 15 to 20 because I think that's a typo that I want to check on, because typically we do get a combination of proceeds from burials and the sale of lots, but that's usually about $15,000 to $20,000, but not to the general fund. So I actually want to correct that commentary because that's inaccurate.
Okay.
So that's those numbers together total. But the cemetery do get to maintain some of their balance from sale of lots and for perpetual care. So
right.
I apologize for that in the commentary. We'll correct that. But the transfer is not changing. We are seeing lower actuals for this, which is kind of funny. You don't want to kind of plan for doing good business with your cemetery. But it has been we've been seeing lower. And I think, Gary's on here too. He's a former cemetery commission member. We're filling up at the Main Street Cemetery. So, most of the sales are at Iron Rail. I'm not sure why we're seeing such a decrease, unless it's just not something that people are planning right now with all the other financial uncertainty. Maybe they're not, will planning. Gary, do you have any insight to that decrease?
Yeah, so I think your numbers need to be corrected in the commentary.
Yeah.
Because, the proceeds are very much dependent upon the actual, unfortunate deaths or whatever. But certainly the amount that we transfer out has been in the 6,000 to 9,000 range over the last few years. So I think 15 to 20 is not correct.
And Jackie, where is this referred to on the Town of Wenham FY22 overview?
So it's referred to, if you're in the revenue expense spreadsheet, Susan.
Yeah.
You're in the end of the revenue section. There's something called transfer from other funds, and you'll see that dollar value at 6,000.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you.
And if I could I think the error is, it says proceeds from burials. So that number from burial and the sale lots should not be put together. The burials by law have to go direct to the general fund, and there's no transfer or conditions on that. The sale of lots come from that very special fund set up just for Iron Rail with the condition. So I think if you look at take the burial amounts out, you'll have the right numbers.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Gary. We'll get that corrected.
Okay,
so then
Jim,
we shouldn't vote on this now because the commentary is going to change, correct?
Well, the commentary is not what you're voting on. You're just voting on the article language. And if you have favorable action for town meeting, we can certainly hold it if you'd like to see the commentary, but the vote is just on the recommendation to town meeting about the actual article action itself.
The 6,000 isn't going to change, correct?
Correct. But I'm happy to have you wait. We'll have additional articles for you to review next week, so we can certainly put a hold on this one if folks.
I don't know. It's up to everybody else.
yeah, I was just going to say it is a perfunctory one, sort of, or whatever. It's consistent year to year, and especially with Gary's kind of further explanation, his involvement, and with Jackie's kind of background around like the amount of 6,000 down a bit, maybe from 7,500. But as long as that's not changing, the article language itself isn't changing, I'd be comfortable voting on it. Voting to recommend favorable action.
Alex, would you like to put that in a motion?
Sure. I just didn't know if anyone else objected or wanted to hold it.
I haven't heard any, so
okay.
I'm pushing it along.
Hearing none, then I move that Wenham FinCom recommend favorable action to town meeting for the cemetery maintenance fund transfer, Article 4, currently number 4. I don't know, Jackie, are those always going to, do we plan for these to change at all? Should we just go by the name and not number?
Yeah, name and not number. That would be wonderful.
Okay. Catherine, does that work for you? Sorry to bring you off mute. If not,
No, I didn't know which Catherine you were talking to. Sorry.
sorry,
That's
Catherine
fine.
Tinsley is okay.
Absolutely.
If
Thank
my,
you.
great, thanks.
Motion made, motion seconded. Here a second,
I'll second it.
second by Susan. All those in favor of of the motion as stated by Alex? Aye,
Carrie,
Jim.
aye.
Alex, aye.
Hi, David.
Hi, Susan.
Carrie, did you raise your hand? I think we did it at the same time. Could you repeat yourself, Carrie?
Carrie, aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the motion carries unanimously.
Jim, it's
Yes.
Dave. I just have not a point of order, just maybe an organizational.
Sure.
Maybe we just go in alphabetical order, so we're not speaking over each other for every vote.
Of course. Good
Does
idea.
any-
Thank
does anyone care? Because I always feel like I'm waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
Do you
Good
mean
idea.
first name or last name?
First name or last name?
Why do you ask good questions? All right, Alex, Carrie, David, Jim, Susan. And whoever makes the motion is the odd person out.
Okay.
Good idea.
Okay, Article 5, Water Fund. Transfer from the water operating budget to water capital reserve fund. See if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $35,000. And that's in our existing budget, correct, Jamie? The $35,000 transfer? From the FY22 operating budget into the water capital reserve account.
Yes, I believe it's on, from in last year's.
Yeah. Right,
I have a question about this.
okay.
So this is for the capital reserve for infrastructure replacement. Does anyone have a sense, in my understanding of the situation, including reading this, is there will be some debt issuance as well as some out of the capital reserve account to fund the replacement of these 28 miles of water lines? Is that correct?
Yes.
And so does anyone have a rough ballpark of what percentage is going to be funded through this capital reserve fund and what's going to be debt issuance? Or are we not that far along yet?
So I think, Carrie, the goal is, so I think there's, Jamie, I don't know if you know this number. I think there's maybe 150 to 200,000 in this account at this point. We've only been doing this $35,000 transfer for a couple, like maybe 4 years at this point.
Mhm.
So the goal is that, you know, we're talking about a millions of dollar project at some point to do the water infrastructure. There's
Yeah.
also paving components, you know, there's other utilities that we'll have to involve. So this is really to just create an account for when we do go to borrow. It'll cover borrowing costs. It'll probably do some preliminary design work. I would say the lion's share of the project will be bonded, but this will give us some flexibility when it comes time to do some engineering and the cost of the bonding at that time. And hopefully, you know, any bond payment would fall to the water ratepayers. And the hope is to use this money so that the upfront costs can get started with this. And then I would imagine we would see a debt exclusion at some point for this project as well. So this would be basically the startup costs when we begin this project. I think the goal would be to do it that way rather than using this for a short-term emergency, so that, you know, the ratepayers are going to see an increase at some point with a debt, or well, maybe have some debt exclusion. So this gives us that funding to get things started with engineering and to cover the cost of the debt. I would say the last conversation I had with Eric Mansfield, the water superintendent, we're talking about maybe 10 years from now before we start seeing significant work for that. It's, definitely something we're trying to financially plan for. And this is not going to cover the cost of the project, but at least we'll get it started when the time comes.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Startup costs. And I just have one more question about this. You were talking about water rate, like in payments reflected in the water rate related to some of these costs. What's the slicing and dicing of the cost to replace the water mains from general revenues versus water rates? No, we're doing the versus debt issuance. I guess I'm trying to figure out the whole like pie chart of where all the
Sure.
money's coming from to do this.
So I think the thought process would be is that we would issue debt and we'd have to make pay downs every year on that debt. And so I can't predict what the breakdown would be. Maybe Jamie has done this in another community and can speak to it. I'm not sure what the breakdown would be, but the goal would be that there'd be we'd have to fund the pay down every year of the debt. And with water, it's typically water in, water out. So we'd see that fall on the water rate payers. If you're someone who's on, Hull Street, for example, is on Beverly Water. So to affect their tax bill for their property tax doesn't make sense because they're not a water rate payer that's affected by the service.
Oh, that's interesting. I assumed it would be based on just everyone who pays taxes in Wenham. Huh.
Yeah, with water, that's why we talk about the water rate payers versus taxpayers, because we do have, Parsons Hill neighborhood, Hull Street, and a couple other parts of that area that are on Beverly Water Sewer. And we have a few Hamilton residents on our water and a few Wenham residents on Hamilton water. So that's why it's based on your water service provider versus your tax bill, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Yep. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
For when we'll have to pay attention 10 years from now when we actually start doing it.
Yeah, I think I don't expect, I imagine at some point the Water Commission will come forward with their, plans. This is something that they'll probably start talking about 3 or 4 years before we get going on it. Aside from this 35 that we're putting aside every year to get those startup costs available.
Thank you for the background.
Absolutely.
Would this also, could this particular fund also be used in an emergency?
No. Jamie, do you want to speak to that? I think this only can be spent by a vote of town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it because I think it has to be a vote of town meeting. I can confirm that, but I'm almost positive it's a vote.
So if we had a $20,000 emergency, I'm just looking at the water fund, the water department budget. Where would that come? Where would we have that money? We have debt service for the water tower. We have a capital outlay account.
So water does have like an actual reserve account, but
Okay.
I recall, Jim, a few years ago, the water department had to expend more money than we budgeted for due to some increased costs of the initial work for the Dodges Row subdivision. And then eventually that got paid back by the developer, but we had to front materials costs and then get back by the developer. So the following town meeting, we actually went back and corrected that. So I imagine that's probably how we'd respond to something of an emergency as well, as to, we have to, do an emergency procurement, deal with that emergency. And then I would imagine that we'd rectify that with a later town meeting.
Okay, so the emergency 20,000 example would come out of our general reserve fund?
Would come out of the water reserve fund, not water capital reserve, but water reserve.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sometimes, Jim, so similar to how when we have a surplus of funds, it falls to free cash, but with water, it falls to water reserve because that's separate dollars from the ratepayers versus tax dollars coming in.
Right. Okay. Got it.
How much is in that fund? Do you know? I have to say, these are the most articulate explanations of very complicated things I think anybody could ever have done. You did a bang up job explaining this stuff.
I say thank you to that, but I also can I send you that answer tomorrow because I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me. And I don't know, Jamie, you don't have that in front of you.
No, I don't. But yeah, we can get it tomorrow.
Yeah, sorry. That was honestly a good question, Susan, because it's not one the FinCom's asked when we've gone over this article for the last few years. I wasn't ready for you.
Okay,
You're saying we've been slacking, Jackie?
excuse me,
No, I'm
Dave.
just saying it's frustrating how creative you're getting with your questions. Frustrating in a good way, though.
Jim?
Yes, Tom.
Yeah, I'm the last name alphabetically, so I just want to make sure everyone else is, okay, great. One thing is, I haven't had the opportunity to talk with Eric and Bill about this. If I do, well, I'm here, it's fine. If not, my successor should. Even though this is being talked about 4, 5, 6 years down the road, the water department and the public works department should coordinate their activities here. Because if you're doing road work, if you're planning to do road work, that you're going to be opening up the road again in 2, 3, 4, 5 years to do water repair, you should generally coordinate the two. So you're not doing the same job twice. And I know that Bill wouldn't be doing that or Eric, but there should be some coordination between these two departments as you're going forward and beginning your plan for road work, capital road work for the next 5, 6 years, and your water work. So you're doing that as basically one project and not two separate and distinct projects.
And that's part of the consideration. This is the question as we look at the town governance process, right?
Correct. The government study committee is not reviewing that at this point. They're reviewing the 3 to 5.
Oh, right.
But that is on their agenda to go forward. And I have generally in the past have had water, in DPW generally in the same department.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
If I may, just 1 or 2 quick questions on the numbers for water department. So let's see here, this article, I have to move you all, is for 35,000. So does that, in the roll-up spreadsheet, does that go under, so water department 450, would that be, I was looking for, 35,000, I see that, capital outlay, right?
Correct.
And then is the roughly 100,000, I think it was, that we budgeted last year for administrative services, that was the first year in FY21, back to the town, is that captured under expenses, which looks, I don't know what that number is, 240-ish?
So yeah, that would be under expenses.
So is that ballpark correct of 240,000 in expenses? Wasn't it around 100? That's too much. It wasn't 100,000.
The
It's
water
100
indirect,
this year.
yeah, it's 100.
100.
Like 94 last year. So the water indirects, they're outlaid as an expense of the water department under the water department expense line. And then they subtract off the bottom line under the general fund towards the end of the general fund wrap up, which Jamie's going to go over the whole general fund revenue expense wrap up in a few minutes. So she can point that out to you on that spreadsheet if you're not seeing it.
Got it. Okay. So that explains the 138 to 241 for last fiscal year, that 100K jump. And then we have another increase. That's fine. You answered my 35. And I have one other, but I'll hold it until we go over the roll up. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on the article? Would one of the FinCom members like to make a motion to accept favorably, to promote favorable action on this article?
Sure, I'll make that motion. Let's get my glasses. I make a motion that the Finance Committee take favorable action on Article number 5, the transfer from water operating budget to water capital reserve fund.
For a second,
I second it.
second by Susan. Any further questions or comments or discussion? All those in favor of the motion as presented by David? Aye, Jim?
Hi, Alex.
Hi, Carrie.
Hey, David.
Hi, Susan.
Thank you. We didn't do it in alphabetical order, did we, David?
Well, chairman has his privileges, right?
We yield to you, Jim.
I forgot.
Chairman has
Deference.
privileges.
Okay.
Can I just comment that this has been the fastest of all the years I've served on FinCom that we've figured out how to say favorable or not favorable action and how to vote on it. I'm sorry to bring it up. I hope I'm not bringing something up, but way to go. We finally don't have to discuss it for 30 minutes of what
It's kind of an awkward phrasing of the words, isn't it?
Well, 5th year's the charm, right?
Article 6. Some money work in town. It's basically accepting from the state. Is that correct? See if the town
Correct.
available funds, a sum of money to work on the roads, subject to conditions, mass, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. To conform to the requirements of Mass DOT Highway Division. I think that's right, $150,000 as in the commentary. Anything
Jim,
other?
can I make a note?
Yeah, sure.
So we have the 150 in the commentary based on what we anticipate, but we don't limit ourselves to that number, because if the state decides to grant us a little bit of more money, we want to be able to accept that no matter what. So.
And that has happened at least in 1 year that I can remember in the past 10. That they've had a breakdown. They've done actually two payments.
Should we make a note of that in the commentary? You have totaled approximately 150, so it's a number that can. You're making the statement that the number can go up or down, I suppose, too.
Right.
Yeah, this article will cover us whatever, regardless of the outcome of the state budget process.
Okay. FinCom, any questions or comments on Article 6 that you have? Hearing none.
Chairman?
Excuse me?
Mr. Chairman, just
Yeah.
quick 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. One thing that I would like to add, if we have a chance into the town meeting book, or if not for the presentation, I generally have Public Works present a listing of streets that they are intending on using street money on in the upcoming fiscal year. I don't know if Bill has that available. I've been told that we haven't done that in the past, but if we can do it for this year, that would be great. If not, I would recommend to my successor to, in the future for town meetings, to have a listing of proposed street work that is being done, because that's something that voters have a tendency to get their hands around fairly easy, because it puts a face to the article in saying that, oh, these are the streets that we will be addressing this year in the next forthcoming fiscal years also.
I had that actually. Edel Avenue is one, and I can't find the other. I asked the question, but anyway, I'm sure Bill has it down. It's coming up.
Has Tom, in your experience, is it actually written into the commentary, or
It's an attachment.
it's an attachment, or is it discussed by the Department of Public Works directors? That
We generally have put it, I've actually discussed this with Gary. We actually put it we put it in the warrant book that gets distributed to town meeting members. And I've generally put it up on the screen as a, as a display, not up for discussion. We're not using it as
right.
a discussion, why Main Street over Cherry Street or something like that. But this is just an estimated list on our roadway plan. It's always good to have at least a 5-year roadway plan of these are the roads that you're going to be maintaining over the years or making changes. Generally, life expectancy is about 20 years on a road. And it's a good thing to have a plan for your roads going forward for the next 20 years.
So in that commentary or in that statement, would we roll into that the 85,000 that the town contributes to this capital?
Generally, when I've done the presentation, this is for all,
For all
money.
dollars available?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that road capital, a lot of that goes to everything from street signs to fixing sidewalks to striping and all of that stuff. So that's,
So it's not
I think, in
necessarily.
a different category.
If I was here long enough, I've been actually done budgets where those items are broken out, where you actually have a line in your budget for sidewalks. You'll have a sub line in the not capital budget, in the DPW budget for signs and so forth. So, but generally it's a good thing to have a roadway listing of what your intentions are for the next few years.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Article 6. Whose turn is it to make a motion? Okay, I'll make the I move that the Finance Committee take favorable action on road work, Chapter 90 fund, and accept resources from the state to affect work on the town roads.
Second motion.
Carrie, second. Any further discussion or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion that I have made, we'll go in alphabetical order.
Aye, Alex.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, David.
Hi, Susan.
Aye, Jim. Did we do it right?
If you go by the last name, I think so.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, the last article is community preservation.
Jim, can we move that one to next week? I had put it on hoping that the commentary would be done so that you guys could see the figures. But I just didn't have a chance. Can we move that to next week's list?
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, Jackie has done a roll-up of revenue expenses to date and is prepared to kind of talk about that, so we get an overview of where the budget is to date with considerations for use of free cash and addressing the capital and operational expenses that are above the normal, if you will, capital and operations. Jamie?
So we took we got numbers for health and we updated those numbers. Jackie and myself went over the responses that we got for the prioritization, and anything that came low for everybody, we took off of the revenue expense sheets. Hold on one second. Let me just open the memo.
Sorry, Jamie, I'm just trying to zoom. I don't know that
It's
folks.
okay.
So just, I'm sorry, once.
Yeah, it's okay.
This was sent when? Was it
I sent it Monday night.
Monday night? Yeah, here we go, 7:48.
Is that better? Can folks see that?
Yes,
Or should I keep
that is,
trying?
that's much better, Jackie.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Jamie, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to see both of my screens at the same time. So our total revenues for FY22 is projected at $21,751,001. At this time, we plugged in no free cash. Our free cash did come in a little lower at 826, with the first 250 is set aside for reserve as per the town's policy. So that leaves us approximately 576,000 that can be used for one-time capital or operating. Like I said, we reviewed the prioritization. We took off everything that came in low. A lot of it was the smaller amounts, like the 4,000 for finance budget, and I think there's a few other things that we took off of the top. We adjusted school numbers, came in at a lower. I think it was a savings of approximately 107,000 for Wenham, so we adjusted those numbers. Jackie, can you just move down a little bit?
Jamie, do you want the memo instead? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just trying to go back and forth between both of my screens, looking at the memo and remembering what we changed on here.
Yeah, want me to hop to the memo for you?
Yeah, it's easier. Thank you, Jackie.
I'm gonna get a new job as Vanna White for Zoom. It's gonna be great.
There we go.
Okay.
It's a lot to remember. We're still waiting for numbers for Essex retirement and the vocational school. Those numbers that we have are still assessment numbers. In a few minutes, Jackie will speak to the inspectional services portion. But we're also evaluating the town clerk position salary. And then one of our leases that we had talked about in the capital projects had been currently projected at 4 years. So we had DPW go back in and see what the cost would be for the lease for a 5-year. And then like I said, the updated number for school, it originally came in at, I think, 2.9% increase, what now went down to 1.686 or 2.3. It came just over 2 or just under 3, and now it went down to 1.86 over FY21. Some of the reductions that we made were the 873 for the administrative assistant in the clerk's office. And we're working on salary information for the clerk position. We don't expect much savings. Definitely not savings over $5,000. So $42,000 were reduced for the COA painting and the HVAC server project. We're going to push that into next year. $4,000 for the budgeting software. We're going to revisit this in the future. I think right now we'll just continue to do the budget as we've been doing and look at this at another time and look for other options. There might be better options out there. The legal expense budget, we decided that based on accruals, we were comfortable reducing that for $10,000. We didn't want to go down anymore because we do have the collective bargaining agreements coming up. And with the government study and updating HR policies, we don't want to reduce that any further. We discussed with police reducing the salary for the confidential secretary position for $7,500. COA had asked for an increase of $5,900 for the part-time staff, but we decided to reduce that and wait for the compensation committee study to be completed. And I think at that point, that's going to take a general look at everybody. And then at that point, we can discuss how we would move forward. We cut the $65,000 one-ton dump truck. I think in discussions with Bill, he said that that was the one thing that he could hold off on. So we decided to cut that. So we got our health insurance projections from Maya, and they're coming in at a 3% instead of an 8%. So that generated a $44,000 reduction. And then annual town report, there was $3,500 that was requested, and that we ended up cutting that portion of it as well. All the reductions together were $182,773, which our initial, what was our initial? I think by the time that brings us down, I think to 693. Oh yeah, there we go, 693, 616. The only thing we had to increase was a conversation came up with police for salary. It's per their collective bargaining contract, and it's for $12,000, and it's for officers who receive a certain number of years of experience prior to joining Wenham Police Department. They're allowed to bypass certain rate reductions for new staff in favor of the year of service. So that, because that's a contractual obligation, we had to increase the $12,000 on their salary budget. So just to recap, the overall updated revenue projection is $21,751,001. The overall updated expense projection as of March 8th is $22,444,617. Our deficit without the use of free cash is $693,616. What we do have for free cash availability is $576,000. The difference from the deficit after free cash, so once we apply free cash, our difference is $117,616. So we're still awaiting final numbers from several sources, and we're working on budgetary reductions suggested by staff and FinCom. So I think our next point of action is going over the FinCom prioritization sheets, because the only thing that we reduce from those sheets is everything that came in low. I think now we should take a look at what came in medium, high, and high priority, and see where else we could shred a little.
Just a quick question, Jamie, on the very last, under the conclusions. We're waiting on the sources. Are those, do we have plug numbers for those sources at this point, right?
We do. We just don't have like estimated projections or assessments from them. This is
Right.
what we're projecting. This is what we've assessed and what we've projected. We don't have actual numbers from either the VOC or from the retirement.
Did I hear you? I want to make sure I heard you. Did you mention that you think that those numbers would be less than what we have in our plug conservative numbers? Or
I'm not sure.
okay.
I've been trying to get, I think so, but I've been trying to get a sense from them where we're going, and I've heard nothing yet, and I'm pretty persistent, but.
Jim, we budgeted the Essex retirement for how we've forecasted it in prior years. So historically, since I've been here, we've budgeted it conservatively, so it comes in under. The question is, some years it's been under by a couple thousand, some year it's been a couple hundred, we've never had the circumstance where, at least since I've been working on the budget, that it's come in over what we forecasted, but I don't expect us to make up too much ground on either of those projections. We try to forecast as accurately as possible, so maybe we'll see a couple thousand in savings, but I would be optimistic that we'll bridge the full gap by any means.
Okay. I just wanted to get a general sense of where that would go. Okay, so let me just toss this out for the Finance Committee discussion. I'm going to suggest the first order of discussion is any questions, comments as to the reductions of the 82,773. I know we had discussed a number of these already, but I think it'd be helpful for the committee to ask any questions or comments on those reductions that have been made, that have been presented.
I have a question.
Okay,
On the Council on Aging, on the increase in wages, it's like $5,900 or something, or I think people need to understand that is taking like the secondary driver from $13.06 an hour to $15. And it's taking a primary driver to $18 from $14.54. And then an outreach coordinator to $20 from $18.73. I hardly think that we really need to wait for a compensation analysis to not have the town of Wenham actually paying an employee $13.06 an hour. I think it's just appalling that we've been doing that. I mean, there's just no excuse. And now to just cast it in stone and say, well, we're going to wait for the compensation analysis, which hasn't even started yet. I can't see holding back that amount of money on people like this that are actually coming to work every day during this whole pandemic for $13.06 an hour. With this town and what we pay for taxes and the wealth in this town, if we can't pay people more than that amount of money, I don't even know what to say.
I think you said it.
Can I
And
make
I
a
think
comment?
this is just up for the reason why we took it off is because that's where it ranked. It ranked in the lower, so and that's why we took it off. But it's definitely up for. That's why we do the prioritization, so it's up for discussion.
Yeah, to that point, I agree with Susan. I think in looking back why I took it off, I didn't see it as a high priority as far as debate and cost and what we need right now. So I probably didn't think it through as much as I should, or more to Susan's point. I saw it more as a given and not a debate, not to take it off take it off the chart.
If I may make a couple of comments, Jim, generally, and first off, Susan, to your point, I think those well stated, excellent points. One, with respect to the low rate of pay. I mean, there's no denying that's very low, and it needs to be corrected if it's too low. So I'm not even really going down that path. I really like how you brought up the compensation study element, because I've always thought I applaud when departments like Jim did, when department heads are reaching out and doing a bit of research on the local nearby communities, picking up the phone, calling other COAs, other senior centers, and just getting a sense for what are you paying, rather than waiting for an administrative compensation in class, whatever it's called. In 11 months, we're going to have it, 15 grand, whatever it is, just doing the homework and building a case for it. Yeah. I think that presents it as fair and reasonable. So I'm definitely all for that. And I'm not, and the one thing, so I want to transition away from that because this is falling into tree warden territory or plant to tree territory. And I'm not trying to marginalize or minimize the importance of having appropriate wages for COA and other employees. But we do run the risk of spending too much time on a $5,000 item. I just want to make one comment, and that is, I appreciate the efforts to have all these items spelled out, prioritized, organized by Jamie and by Jackie and Tom and others. We have, with no free cash available, and the estimates that are there, 693,000 deficit. So prioritization is moot, is best I can tell. If we used every dollar, we're still down, what, 117? If we plug 576 with our goal of presenting a balanced budget for 117,600 negative excess levy capacity, I don't know why we're prioritizing any of this, unless the discussions are to be predicated upon we are all good with an override and let's move forward and figure out how big our override should be with these items. So I just don't think we've had that discussion yet. I think in prior years, and Tom and Jamie, like, just joining us, we appreciate all your help, but typically, like, the town administrator would obviously have had years of working with the departments and work, not that you're not doing this, but also would work kind of between our meetings, if you will, to arrive at some of these cuts, which you're doing anyway, and which you've presented. If cuts is probably the wrong word, but reductions from initial expenditure estimates. But I do think that we've got a long ways to go. We've got 120 to reduce just to have a balanced budget if we were to use all our free cash, which I understand is not the goal. So I just want to say that we could prioritize high, low, medium, all of these things, but anything that is yay or nay, whether it's high or low priority relative to others, puts us in an override zone. So, and if the last thing I'll say is it probably makes sense to have the priority regardless. Should we come up with higher revenue estimates or lower expense, then we know where to go and we're not starting from scratch. So that's all I was going to say. Thanks.
I think our unstated goal, maybe it's been stated, is to enter into this budget cycle without an override.
Yeah.
We have had 4 years straight of overrides. And
Three, Jim, sorry.
We've had 3 prior. This would be the 4th if we, right. Yeah,
Yes,
right.
sir.
So I think that's been our goal. We haven't, I don't think we've formally stated it, but we've had informal discussions around that. So in terms of prioritization, I mean, we have this list and then we have what's in the budget on the capital and personnel list.
Correct.
So this is one list that is proposing reductions. And then we have still in the budget capital with that have had a high or medium kind of feedback from the finance committee. So I'm not sure, Alex, where exactly what you were saying, whether we should discuss further the $182,000 reductions and have some discussions on those, or also move to the other areas that had that are in the budget incorporated into that $117,000 current 117 using, which we haven't discussed, all of our free cash. We haven't really, well, with the exception of the 250,000. I don't know if that's a discussion that the committee would also like to entertain. Do we want to use 250 of free cash, 450 of free cash? What would be something, and put more into a reserve account? We have talked about that in the past if we had the resources to do it. I'm kind of just an open-ended statement. It's not even a question, I suppose.
I think that the goal of not having an override is a good one. I think, I don't know how much appetite the town has for an override at this particular juncture. I would suggest not much.
Susan, we agree with you. And I know Jackie and Jamie, that's what we're going into to get to the point where there is no override. I mean, there may be some discussion. Never went in with this looking at, oh, we need an override. Absolutely not. I mean, not particularly at this time of year for this. And so our goal is to get this down to a 0 override basis.
Jim, can I make a quick comment as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
The goal of this list tonight was, some of these are items that we knew were cost savings coming. Some are items that we've spoken with department heads, and some are items that got a low priority from FinCom. So we tried to gather those together to kind of help make some decision-making framework. As Tom said, we recognize the affordability component and didn't want to be presenting a budget with an override for you this year. So I think, to Alex's point, not wanting to, get too into the weeds where it's not going to be the most effective. I think we're at the stage that, there's certain items that we're waiting to get final numbers on. But I think, with FinCom and I think with Gary here tonight, we're looking for some direction in terms of that. I would much rather, work with our department heads and, let them know, this is where we are. This is the deficit we're facing. Like, what do you see for your department? A good example is Bill. He had a preferred capital item that he would rather see pushed out to another year. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be helpful from FinCom to get direction on that, that, formally you would like to see no override. And so that we can go back to the department heads and get their input and their creative solutions. We've been having ongoing conversations with a lot of them, but I think that's always my preferred method of starting out making reductions, is getting the FinCom priorities and then hearing from department heads, rather than, I don't like to budget personally where, everyone has to cut 5%, and that doesn't necessarily provide context or support to certain programs because some of our departments are so much larger than others. So I think tonight what we'd like to hear from you is, I think we're hearing the direction no override this year, that the goal is to walk into town meeting with a balanced budget with no override. But I think I'd like to hear if that's like something where you'd like us to go to department heads and work with them for their cuts beyond, what we've talked about in terms of, tangible capital and the FinCom priorities. Is that kind of the direction that FinCom, I don't want to speak for FinCom. I'm just trying to understand your direction so that we can work towards balancing the budget over the next few weeks with the department heads.
Yeah, my framework of thought about this right now is concurring on no override. And then, another kind of policy question that's come up over the years is how much do we use of free cash? And, I've been doing back of the envelope calculations, maxing out free cash as much as possible, but keeping the 250,000 in. And so that brings us to like 117,000 deficit. And I look at this list as, how much can we get reduce that deficit through this list versus also waiting for some of these other unknowns to come in, which may take a couple weeks to flesh out. But kind of, it's a work in progress. Like I think this list is instructive, but not definitive. And then actually, I'd like to comment on what Susan said earlier. I wasn't aware that we weren't doing like a basic $15 an hour for a lot of employees, and it's probably in some of our spreadsheets. I just didn't focus on it, what the hourly rate is. This is a chronic issue in Wenham, is how much we pay our employees, and it's a tension that exists with, we have a deficit. Where can we make cuts? And sometimes that comes with lowering salaries. So, I would have another goal of trying to at least get to $15 an hour baseline for employees, taking into context all of these other pressures and demands on the budget.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
to the Finance Committee as a whole. Is that the $15 an hour, Carrie? Is that basically a goal of the Finance Committee for us to meet at the minimum for employees here?
I
didn't know for us to work on.
I'm not aware that we've ever had that discussion.
Okay.
We have not.
I think we did make adjustments to the library because they did have some employees who were under the new minimum wage standards, I think 2 years ago. So the library was not keeping pace with minimum wage, and that was corrected. But I think the most comparable conversation for the COA, other than looking at other COAs as Jim has done, is how Hamilton's handling policy with their part-time employees for the rec, because those are positions that are often competitive in that area. But I don't think the full 5,900 would be needed to get all of those positions to that minimum 15. But I think, if the policy direction is that we want to look at cuts outside of salary or outside of the lower rate increases, that's something that we can certainly, again, I don't want to spend too much time on one particular item, but that's something we can certainly circle back to for next week and get like what that differential would be, so that I'm happy to deal. I think that's a huge equity issue. It's not an issue. This is like maybe the second year at least that we've pushed off on these market rate increases. They would still get COLA increases, just not the additional market rate. But not to spend too much time on this one item, but that's something certainly we can come back with for next week.
I'm talking about these people, these lower paid employees. I'm not taking salaries off the table completely. I just,
I'm sorry, Susan, I meant these part-time positions,
That's what we were
not
talking about.
salaries. I apologize.
Susan, the lower level payments, that's what we're talking about, those salaries.
okay.
Yeah, the lower part-time hourly positions.
Now, who else is being paid less than $15 an hour?
That's what I'm saying. I think with the correction to the library, I think these are the only positions that are currently in this category, with the exception of some of the seasonal recreation positions.
I have a thought. But I first, let me just share an observation or a thought that, if we went through the budget and began to make readjustments to salaries in one area and not necessarily an adjustment in another area where it's being contested outside of a market rate, it can put us in a kind of an awkward position because we're moving here, then we're moving there, and would it necessarily be wrong numbers? Possibly not, but I think we need to do it in concert with an overarching kind of review. Having said that, would we consider that no employee within the town of Wenham make less than $15 an hour?
If I may, so I think that's fair and reasonable, certainly not unreasonable, and most likely makes sense. I think that's what we're saying, that we're in support of this for part-time employees, of which there are, we all assume, not many who are making less than 15 an hour. I think we're showing broad support of that. And I didn't mean to suggest earlier that this list is an all or none, like, oh, until we solve the revenue, the levy capacity matter, we can't entertain any of them. Obviously, we could have a scenario whereby some of this is in even without an override. And I do also support this matter in particular, the $5,000. But I think that rather than suggest a policy effect right now, we can trust that town administrator, that finance director and administrative services will help us understand whereby there are exceptions to that informal goal even of having reasonable wages across the board, and notify us, hey, by the way, here's another group you should consider. Because to your point, Jim, if we make some adjustments without full scope of all employees in town, we do run the risk of addressing one that's put before us and not addressing something that isn't put before us. So we need that to be brought to our attention so that we can ensure that there's equity and across the board with these wages.
Right.
However, this is a situation where these increases were put forward by the department head with a very comprehensive rationale. So I think in a sense, this is all I'm worried about right now, because this was obviously took some time to put together. The rationale is there, and I just appreciate how it was done. It was done carefully. And anyway, that's the end of my commentary.
I completely agree. And I'd even made, when we started talking about the compensation study, I think even before Jim had put this forward, I made a point of saying that I thought he did a great job years past. I think it was even 2 years ago, where he said our van drivers making X and other van drivers are making this. So I'm in full support of department heads doing what Jim did. I guess what I'm saying is, for the department head who doesn't get around to doing that, I would hate to leave someone else. I would hate to ignore another similar scenario that just wasn't put forth in the budgeting process. And for that type of thing, we would rely on town hall to have general awareness and inform FinCom, or even work with that department head and kind of prompt a similar adjustment request, perhaps.
Right.
If
So
I
then
can
we ask
make one note. Sorry,
So-
Carrie, go ahead.
And then to town hall, could you let us know who or how many of employees are working in Wenham that are making under $15 an hour? If it's any in addition to these that Susan just mentioned?
Yeah, I'll look and I'll I'll get that to you, Carrie.
Okay. thank you.
Okay,
If I may too, I just want to note that these two salary items are only on here because they are not obligations, not because they're not important, but just because they are not a part of our contractual obligations to employees. So when we talk about salaries, these are our non-obligations. Anything else we're going to talk about in salary, if that's something that we're going to go forward with a discussion about, we're going to have to talk about, reduction of a position, because there's not a way for us to, reduce a salary without reducing either the hours or the workload of a position. So I just want to make that very clear, that at this point, we haven't proposed any reductions in positions, whether it's reduction of hours or reduction of a position altogether. So these are the only two salary items at this point because they're not part of our current obligations to employees. So I just want to say that, it is a more difficult time to talk about reduction of full positions without a select board in place. So I'm just wanting to point out that we do have obligations to our employees, and I take those very seriously. And I know all of you as well, because you're always so supportive of our staff. So in terms of the direction of going to an override, I think, to the point I made earlier, that's why we're looking for your direction about us going back to the department heads and working with them on proposals for reductions. Because while, staffing and salary is a huge percentage of our budget, of our annual operating budget. So it is the area where you're most likely to see a lot of dollars, but it's not necessarily the area where we'd want to make certain cuts because it does affect the services and the department as a whole. And I think that's why I was trying to skew to see if you wanted us to work with department heads about what services could be cut, what expenses could be cut, because once we get into the conversation about positions being cut, it's a much more difficult time of the budget process without a quorum of a select board.
I don't think we're anywhere near cutting positions.
I don't think
I just
you are
don't
either,
think we
Susan.
are.
I just wanted to say that out loud for the record that, I think we want to.
I agree with that statement, Susan, that I don't think that's where we're at. I think it would be very helpful, yes, to go back to department heads, talk about further reductions in some of their line items, see what they come up with. Now, I guess I had a question. Maybe I asked it. I can't remember. Have these reductions of the 182,000, have these been discussed with the department heads, or is this an initial kind of review that Jamie and you made?
This is like an initial review. The only conversation we've had was with police.
Okay.
And that was more because they were coming in with the increase of 12. So,
12,000.
right off the bat, we were kind of like, you got to decrease the police salary because that was what was recommended by most FinCom members in their prioritization. So that's the only conversation we've had. This is more just discussion based, showing you guys, this is what came in low. This is what what we came up with as a decrease. Now let's discuss. So nothing that was on here is set in stone per se. It's just a focus point and a points for discussion.
So I guess I would, in going back to discuss with department heads, I would suggest we start with this list with the department heads and then move a little bit further, because we still have a $120,000 problem.
I mean, that's what the intention is, Jim, because our intention is to get this to a balanced budget, a no override budget. So these items plus the rest that's remaining there, correct?
Now, somebody mentioned a while ago, I think it might have been Jim, that there was some better news on the iron rail. Am I hearing things or?
There is, but that's not unrelated to this.
Okay.
It's not on the agenda, but basically some more money will be coming in, but that's unrelated to the budgetary items right now.
Okay.
It's a revenue piece that would have potentially, Susan, a positive impact on the budget. But no numbers, we haven't arrived at a FY22 absolute number yet, is my understanding.
Right.
But it's
what What about overlay reserves? I mean, I know in years past, it's not trickery, it's not stealing, it's a matter of our allocations, right? Like Jackie, you'll recall with Peter in years past and others on FinCom that, we've squeezed, 30 or 40,000 if appropriate. It becomes down to a matter of versus actuals, I suppose. And I know with rates increasing, we're likely to test it there, but thoughts?
Alex, can I give one note on that? Actually, I appreciate you bringing it up. So this Tuesday, the assessors are meeting and they should be finishing up their abatement season because they, that application is due February 1, and then they have some time to review those. And obviously we want to make sure they've got the capacity if needed for any abatements. So that's something that we should be hearing from the assessors about, that how much they're planning to pay out in abatements, and that would lend to how much we could potentially ask them to return from the overlay. But that's a really good point to bring up.
There is an intention. I've had the discussion with the chair and I had the discussion with our assistant assessor. One of the good news is they do not have any cases before the appellate tax board. So there's nothing major out there at this point that could have a serious impact on the overlay. And their intention, and as Jackie is correct, is to release, going forward to release some. The actual number we don't have right at this point.
Okay, thank you.
And that's not Jackie is correct, and Jamie, that's not part of the budget at this time as far as utilization of it. It's not estimated in there.
With a constant level appropriation.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct.
Thank you.
And is that just real estate taxes, or does that include excise taxes?
So the assessor's overlay includes real estate tax abatements. It also includes things like CPA exemption and other exemptions. And it also includes what we pay out for the senior and veterans tax work-off programs. So if you look on the revenue side, Susan, we have a deficit on the revenue side to put aside for the overlay at 195,000. And that includes projections for abatements, exemptions. We added a senior exemption a few years ago to help some of our older residents, lower income older residents, and then all of those tax work-off programs. So you'll see that on the revenue side as a deficit that we set aside.
Okay, thank you.
Just a point of clarification on the overlay account. Is there a formula that drives how much can be returned to the general fund?
Generally, not necessarily a formula to my knowledge, but generally they have to make sure they have enough put aside for anything that would be outstanding that they anticipate not coming in.
And then the remainder could potentially go into the general fund for general use for town operations or town government.
Yeah, by appropriation, correct.
By appropriate, right. Okay. Where are we, folks?
You're at 750.
Okay, what about the reduction? Now, the master plan last year, people were talking about $100,000. This year, it's $125,000. And I know I keep bugging people for firm estimates. Does anybody have a document that actually says this is what it would cost and I'd also like to know, I know Margaret was asked if she would get the cost for Hamilton and for Ipswich. And I haven't heard, I don't know how I would hear what those costs were, but I think Hamilton is an appropriate comp for it. And I don't know how much their master plan cost.
Susan, I can get that from Margaret tomorrow. We can include that in the follow-up email.
Okay.
I haven't seen it go by my email yet. I don't think Jamie saw it either.
I haven't seen it.
Okay. And in terms of the 125, so Margaret did reach out to several consultants. So that 125 number is based on actual quotes from the consultants. So she's gotten several, some for 125, some for 150. So those are based on actual quotes. And I know she submitted the comps from other communities. I can ask her if she can redact the business names on some of the quotes.
Right. Yeah, but they weren't like Winchester to me is not a comp for Wenham. And it
Sure.
was approximately the same cost. And that just doesn't make sense to me. Or Beverly. I mean, Beverly is one of the most complex communities around. You have people in Pride's Crossing. If you ask them where they live, they say Pride's Crossing. And you say in Beverly, and they say, no, that's not Beverly. So it's very complex. It's not like Wenham.
Well, something I think that I'll ask Margaret for as well is some context, because some of those communities have already done planning. We are at a deficit in that we have not done a master plan in such a significant period of time. So we're not, Tom's been talking about, I think it was Swampscott that he worked on, but that was actually a renewal of a plan. That wasn't a plan from scratch the way that we're kind of facing. We do have some work done from those other groups that we hope to draw from. I believe Catherine Harrison spoke about that in public input, the 4 that we have. So I can certainly ask Margaret to provide a little context of those communities, if those are, you know, revising a 10-year-old plan, revising a 20-year-old plan, starting from scratch. Because, you know, and other communities have different things. You know, we have an open space component that others might not. So do you feel like that would be, is that kind of what you're trying to wrap your arms around in terms of that? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it just seems like you see $130,000 for Winchester, and then you want 125 for Wenham, and it's not, in real estate, you would have called it a comp. It's not a comp, you know. And Hamilton, I think, would be the most appropriate one we could use. And I was surprised when she didn't know how much it cost. I need a rationale for that number.
I think they're just in the bidding process for theirs now, but I'll ask her tomorrow and we can send that out, whatever she has.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, to go back to where we're trying to go forward with this discussion, my understanding is, and this is my interpretation, I'm going to try for the Finance Committee, is that Tom, Jackie, Jamie, you're going to go back to department heads, discuss the proposed reductions in that $182,000 amount. And then, in addition, this is a question, would you be discussing with them as well some of the other capital requests that have been made that are currently part of the budget and are within the expenses that arrives at that current 117,000. For example, administrative vehicles, comp and class study, the master plan, the trackless municipal track. Are you going to go back and have those discussions as well with department heads? I see nods.
Yes, Jim, but I don't know that I would limit it to capital because, for example, with the vehicle, if we get off our fleet replacement schedule with vehicles, that may not be what the police department wants to prioritize. You picked on their name, so I'll just pick on them.
Yep.
They may have a different idea of what they want to prioritize for their department from between their capital and expense budget. And I think often department heads can be more creative than we can about their budget. So I don't think we would limit it to capital. I think we'd have the conversation of
Their budget as a whole.
program or service or expense that you feel like you're more flexible on. You know, we had to do this last year in terms of when we were putting items on the table for the town side override. So I think I wouldn't want to limit it to just the capital.
That's fine, Jackie. That's fine. I get it. That's fine. The other question that Alex put out, I kind of inferred it, was how much. We haven't had a discussion, so we have this 576,000 of free cash. Do we want to use the whole amount? Do we want to use part of the amount? If we want to get to how much of that we use, we still have to get back from Jamie, Jackie, and Tom some further discussion information as to what other reductions can be made. Does that make sense to where I'm kind of go with this? And then we get back to the discussion. Okay, so this is the new number that we're working with. what are the implications for what the deficit looks like and how much we want to use of free cash or not going forward.
And I mean, I think some of that is going to come back from the other sources of revenue, i.e. The overlay. How much overlay can we put
Yes,
toward the budget and basically leave more free cash on the table? Because
yeah.
overall, it is better, at least from our bonding sense, from our fiscal sense, to keep our free cash, our savings account, as much intact as we can.
Okay, so part of this discussion over the next week is the overlay account. And I think it would be also helpful to come up with the best number we can with the iron rail for 22 as well. I mean, because that every part of dollars moves us along in a better direction.
Sorry, go ahead, Carrie.
A couple things. One, on free cash, there's just this ongoing, I appreciate a stabilization fund. And, as long as I've been on FinCom, this is year 4, it's been a tension between trying to give the taxpayers some kind of relief. I mean, minimal, with maxing out free cash in light of overrides and all the other pressures and structural deficit we've been going with. So we have maxed out free cash usage, I believe, completely the past 3 years.
And your stabilization fund is very low too.
Yeah.
I just want to correct. We haven't used all free cash available after the 250 reserve fund,
But
certified less towards the budget.
Haven't we gone to 250 though? Left only 250 in, or have we left more than 250 in?
Oh, well, 250 goes to reserves regardless, and then the remainder of free cash up to certified level gets used for various things, operating budget or capital and the like. And
the discussion was to put in more than the 250 and to not rely so much on the free cash the past couple of years.
Oh, okay. I wasn't really aware of that. I thought the discussion was more along the lines of, so certainly as it relates to stabilization fund and saving for a rainy day, yes, that's what you do. You put more into savings above the 250 mandated. That said, I think it was more of the certified, let's just say round numbers, 1 million certified, that leaves you 750. My impression was that the early notion of how we should proceed with FY22 is, instead of using 750 to balance the budget or towards the operating budget, let's use it for one-time capital and not so much add additional to, I don't think we really specified higher reserve fund amounts, but maybe we did and I missed it.
Well, not necessarily this year, but like I know Anthony brought that up several times. His Jackie is just like, we got to keep get our house in better order and not use as much free cash or be as reliant on it.
Yeah, sure. I'll revisit the policy. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of in the discussion this year about how much free cash do we want to use versus leave and put into the stabilization fund.
Carrie, can I make a quick point of clarification?
Yep.
Sorry, just at some point too, whenever we find out what the list of cuts are, there will be some one-time things that we will ask to move out of the operating budget into a free cash one-time article. So that goal of reducing the structural deficit is still there. It's just in terms of thinking about it, whether you use the free cash as a separate article or as the operating budget, you still have to get to a balanced budget. If you have an item and what you're funding it with out, that's still balanced. So that's something that at some point, think about the whole thing as one piece, but at some point we'll make a recommendation of these are some one-time things that we'd like to see as a separate article for you to know. I don't know if that's making things clearer or less clear, but just as a point of clarification.
Okay. I had a second point and I forgot what it was. So next.
If I may, I think so. Like as Jamie and Jackie and Tom work with the department heads and others on like finding ways that we can reduce the expenditure to lower the fiscal deficit and lower that shortfall of negative excess levy capacity. That I think the guidance that they're seeking in part from us is, are we looking to cut by 118 or 118 or 118 or 118? And I think the guidance that they're seeking in part from us is, are we looking to cut by 118 or 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 or 693, right? The first being assuming full plug of all free cash available. And the second being if FinCom's policy was a continuation of the earlier, that which was stated as our goal to not use free cash, then that suggests that if that's going to go all towards capital, then that becomes a little bit mired in sort of, well, where do they come from? And you're shifting things around. So I think to me, it feels like it's easy. It doesn't necessarily, we're not committing to using all the free cash of 576 towards the operating budget, which is, by the way, in line with our prior years, which is why it would basically make up the difference. There's no magic. That's why the number is what it is. But it would give them a starting point of, call it 120-ish, rather than try and have some lofty, $693,000 gap, which of course the departments can't make up. Is that a fair statement to kind of operate under those assumptions?
I would agree with that because it'd be realistic at this point. And then we see what other potential revenues we have coming in to help as well, reduce that number.
To be fair, I'm a little confused. Or is the conversation now whether there's direction from the FinCom whether to use free cash at this point?
I think the first consensus point, I believe, is this, that Tom, Jackie, and Jamie will go back, review this list of reductions of 118,000. My understanding further is that the capital items that we have prioritized, there'll be further discussions on these capital items that have medium or low reviews of. The third part around how much capital to use, I think will be predicated on what we come back with in terms of reductions, what we come back with in terms of potential other revenues, and then make a determination of what that number looks like to say, okay, we'll use 450 of free cash and we'll put the other $100, 125,000 into a reserve account, or we use less or we use all of free cash. I think for me at least, I don't know, I'm feeling like we need further exploration of expenses reduction and revenue increases before we make an absolute determination about free cash.
I would agree with that, Jim, because if we're having revenue from Iron Rail, even though it could be low five figures, that makes a difference to where we are now, and then additional expenditures. If you're looking for our opinions now, whether we reduce free cash or not, I think the answer for me would be absolutely, we don't have the choice to use it and try and reduce it. The stabilization funds, I think we just don't have the cash for that if we're not going to go the no override route. So exact numbers I don't have for you, but if you're looking for an inclination, that's where I would be leaning.
Carrie?
I remembered what I was going to say earlier, which Jim, you and I talked a little bit about with Jamie and a couple other people recently. So could the town hall keep us updated on any implications, if there are any, that the American Rescue Plan that was just passed could have on our budget? I read one line item that said for state and local governments, it can go to replace lost revenue. And so, my first thought was Iron Rail. So I just don't know if that's going to be in the mix also with our FY22 budget planning as well.
It could be.
That passed today for House. So now our next step is to wait for guidance from the feds. They'll start sending out clearer guidance as to what amounts, what it can be used for, and then we'll start passing that information along.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just to note another ball that's still in the air in this whole process.
And we thought it'd be easier with a later town meeting, but that would really take up any time for us, did it?
I don't think there's anything easy in front of us. Okay, so is everyone on the same page with what the next steps are. So when we come back next Wednesday evening, we're kind of, we'll be looking at hopefully what we've discussed and I think agreed upon. In
Yeah,
terms
I
of
agree.
take.
I agree, Jim. I think we also need to put pen to paper and kind of put our opinions down. We need to move on, I think, and come to a decision. So I agree with you. I think next Wednesday is a good time to
Okay.
get everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim, so is our goal at this point is to come back to you next Wednesday with a balanced budget and to have that $118,000 basically resolved with here is the recommendations at a balanced budget level.
You referenced what? 700 and what?
Well, right now we're about 117, 118
Right.
out. Is
Right.
your anticipation us to come back next Wednesday with a balanced budget with however we come up with a resolution for the 117, 118 and not put us into an override situation?
I think that would be a very good place to start from, and assuming that we also have some additional potential revenues.
Right, with additional revenues without draining free cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think you can expect questions on what changes you make.
Oh, I wasn't anticipating that. I was just expecting it just to go to favorable action. Thank you, Susan.
That might be a miracle to provide a balanced budget that doesn't use free cash,
I
right?
didn't say use free cash doesn't drain all free cash.
Okay. So just so we're clear, with 576 use of free cash, we're 118 behind. So cuts of 118 are required that would necessitate the use of all free cash for a balanced budget, given current expenses and revenues, both of which we know will change. The expenses through the vicissitudes of dealing with the departments and the revenues through new numbers coming our way, updates, which we think some of them might be favorable. So that's all good. But I do think, I mean, it is as much as we all share in the goal of, not using as much free cash, we've attained that. We've done that last year and the year before. We have come down from 750 consistently to 500. That's a big hit, and it's painful when you do that. So we're feeling the pain of it, but doesn't mean we need to keep jabbing ourselves in the eye.
Well, we've been using free cash over the course of the last, 7 or 8 years, Alex, right?
Yep.
I mean, free cash at one point, I remember 5 or 7 years ago was 1.1 million.
But it's not certified. Yeah, but it's not naughty, right? I mean, our residents have, been killed.
We have a tradition, if you will.
Right.
Yes.
It's the Wenham way.
And we of course are doing this with the expectation of increasing the levy 2.5%. So it's not like we're, this isn't exactly an underride.
No.
Very rarely, if ever, do you see an underride.
No, of course, but yeah, exactly. But we're still at 2.5% levy increase, for what it's worth.
Tom, you must remember Barbara Anderson.
Oh, yes, Barbara.
Like Barbara her voice is singing in my head right now.
It's not in my head.
No, I love Barbara Anderson.
I wish you had told me that before I came here.
Okay, I'm looking at our agenda. It seems to me that we have in fact discussed revenue expenses to date, of course, and the potential for FY22 operating and capital budget items, a potential vote. I don't think we're ready to take a potential vote this evening. We have to have first consensus discussion, consensus, and then a potential vote next week.
Now, So the warrant has to go to the printer on the 23rd. Is that correct, Jackie?
So that Selectman Cheeseman is looking to close the warrant on the 23rd. And then on
Okay,
the 24th, he and I had discussed this, that we plan that FinCom may do their final vote on favorable action on the last few articles that night. But that's the intention, is over those 2 nights that we would close the warrant and finalize FinCom's recommendations. So, if next week doesn't feel as productive as we all need it to feel, I will have a conversation with our printing vendor. But I don't like to I'd like to keep you all on deadline. And as members of FinCom know, this is my favorite time of year to keep you on deadline. So we're
Jackie,
gonna.
I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to you for the last 3 years. That's all.
But you guys did so great tonight. I don't want to jinx it for the rest of the season, but the favorable actions were so good. So great.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
We'll keep pushing
record.
forward.
I have a quick question on that postcard that's going out. Are you planning on putting in language that the Wenham residents need to place an order to receive a hard copy of the town warrant? So that
town
high profile.
You will
Town
all get a
report.
hard copy of the warrant. It's just the town report that will be, but we will, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
And Jackie and I will be working on the town warrant report,
Yes, the FinCom report, yep.
predicated on a little bit on what we did the prior year, but in reading last year's more carefully, there's changes to be made, of course, in terms of different sections of it.
Mhm.
And Carrie, you were right. We don't have a statement in the town report, but just in the warrant book.
Okay. Yeah.
You do get 5 pages in the warrant, which is far more than any other board or committee or department.
Last year, Alex, you just went, it was a 4-page report.
As vice chair, I recommend Alex support you in that because he's really good at it.
Charts and graphs and, Okay.
so we only have the 17th. That's next Wednesday is our last meeting.
Well,
Until we have to vote on the 17th, right?
Well, so that's a conversation too. So often this year, we sometimes will have joint meetings with select board. So you guys will have 2 meetings in a week. And that's at this discretion of your chair. If you feel like you need more time, or I'm not suggesting more meetings. I'm just saying that's at the discretion of your chair.
Gary?
Well, you also have the 24th, right, Jackie, as we planned? So the 23rd,
Yeah.
closed the warrant. You actually have the 24th to get your final votes in. And then the Friday, the 25th, no,
Thursday.
Thursday, the 25th or 26th, we want to get to the printer.
Yeah.
So
Because we could have Gary close the warrant on that Gary, we could have you close the warrant on that Thursday if that works for you.
Yeah,
That
flexible. I mean, yeah. So that's just administrative thing. So I think you
Yeah.
have 2 more weeks, 17th,
Okay.
24th to work.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think to try to absolutely say to ourselves, we're going to finalize next Wednesday is a little ambitious.
But I think to that point too, if you feel like you need an extra meeting between the 17th and the 24th, we can I again, don't want to ever be the person to suggest additional meetings,
Right,
but
right.
if you feel, I don't want you to feel like you don't have that option either.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've thought about that. I've discussed it with a few folks, but trying to be sensitive also to people's schedules and time and so on. But let's go with we will go at the 17th and the 24th as followed the next 2 Wednesdays.
Okay.
Okay, everyone? Is there any new business not anticipated by the chair?
Well, I'm taking off from Susan's point of view, I'm taking off the pictures of myself and Governor Dukakis behind my back here. So for future reference.
People love her or hate her. Oh.
Not hearing any new business. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, Mr. Bagan has made a motion to adjourn.
I
Second,
will
I second.
second by Susan.
And Dave.
Oh,
Any other discussions or questions? David?
yes, Mr. Chairman, we forgot to go over minutes on the agenda.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Minutes.
So do we have to, because the motion's been approved, do we need to like,
Are those, Catherine T, are those the February 10th minutes, or did we do those?
You held the February 10th joint meeting, the Finance Committee meetings on February 10th.
Yeah. What ones are
I have
out?
February 24th and February 3rd is outstanding.
Oh.
So the 3rd, the 10th, and the 24th.
And have I reviewed those, all of those with you? What about the third? I know there was a question about those.
Those were just sent.
Oh,
You
okay.
probably haven't reviewed them. I found them. The meeting of the 10th were held from your last meeting
Yeah.
to allow other people to review them. And the 24th was just your last meeting 2 weeks ago.
And those are, I reviewed those and got them back to you and you sent them out.
I'd have to check on that.
I don't recall seeing the 24th ones, but
Yeah,
Mhm.
I didn't, I don't
I was
know
gonna say,
that
I don't
have the
recall getting them
24th.
back from you, Jim.
Yeah,
I don't recall getting them back from you.
Okay.
so do you
I
want
can
me to
send
just
them
add
again.
them to next week's agenda and we'll approve them at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
If there could be like a minutes email blast, because I couldn't find the one that was just being referenced. So if it's not too much trouble, if we could put them all in.
Yeah, I'll email them
email,
out
that'd be
because I
great.
don't have the 24th, so I think there was miscommunication on that one. So I'll get the minutes together. I'll work with Catherine on which ones you guys all need, and then I'll email
Good.
them out.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the minutes will be deferred till next week. We have a motion to adjourn made by Alex, second by David. Any other questions before we vote on adjourning the meeting? All those in favor of adjournment? By alphabet.
Hi, Alex.
hi, Carrie.
Hi, David.
Hi, Susan.
I, Jim. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everyone's hard work tonight. It was a very good beginning of the discussions. See you all
Thank
next.
you. Bye.
Night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.